Have you ever wondered how the ancients manifested entire worlds without speaking a word? They didn't have apps or affirmations, no vision boards or viral content. And yet, their creations still stand, etched into the stone of forgotten, temples encoded in sacred geometry, whispered through the winds of deserts and jungles alike. How did they do it? How did they shape matter, shift destiny, and summon realities without uttering a single command? They understood something the modern world has forgotten, that the most powerful language isn't spoken. It's felt, it's vibrational, it lives not in words, but in frequency. While today we shout our desires into the void, the ancients became the frequency that aligned with what they sought. They didn't manifest through performance, they manifested through presence. They knew that the universe doesn't respond to what you say, it responds to what you are. This story does not begin with a technique, it begins with a code. A hidden structure passed through time like a sacred torch, guarded by sages, sealed in silence, carved into symbols. It lived in Egypt, in Sumer, in the caves of the Himalayas. But it was never written plainly, never handed out like a tool. It was veiled, veiled because it was sacred, veiled because only those with the inner eyes open could truly receive it. And now, perhaps without realizing it, you stand at the threshold of that same current. The current of remembering. Not remembering facts or teachings, but remembering what you already are. This is not a lesson in doing more. This is a lesson in being differently. Because what the ancient ones left behind was not a recipe. It was a mirror that reflects who you must become to manifest in harmony with the sacred. This is the beginning of a journey that doesn't offer easy answers. There will be no shortcuts here, no guarantees. But if you stay, if you allow the rhythm of this ancient code to move through you, something inside you will begin to stir. A memory, a vibration, a knowing that doesn't come from the mind, but from the marrow. The journey begins now. Through veiled codes, through vibration, not volume, through silence, not spectacle. The four alchemical powers, to know, to want, to dare, to be silent, await your remembrance. Not so you can control reality, but so you can finally align with it. Welcome, traveler, the torch is in your hands now. Let's begin. Lesson 1. To know. The flame. Behind the eyes. There is a kind of knowing that no voice can teach you. It isn't something you read. It doesn't come from study or debate. It arrives like a whisper in the dark, a vibration behind your ribs, a flicker of memory behind your eyes. This is not the knowledge of minds, it is the knowing of the soul. And in the tradition of the ancients, it is the first code, the beginning, the seed from which all creation blooms. This knowing does not shout. It doesn't beg for attention. It rests beneath the surface of thought, waiting for your silence. It speaks in symbols. It pulses in intuition. It reveals itself only when you are still enough to hear it. It is the unspoken language of the universe, and you already speak it. You've just forgotten how to listen. In the mystery schools of old, initiates were not taught through lectures or memorized facts. They were guided inward, into a state of resonance. The Hermetic sages, the Kabbalists, the desert mystics, they all knew real wisdom cannot be transferred from one mind to another. It must awaken from within. Hermes Trismegistus never wrote plain instructions. His words were riddles, loops, echoes, not to confuse the student but to pierce the veil, because only the heart prepared in silence can understand what logic alone cannot. In the Kabbalistic tree of life, there is a hidden sphere rarely named and even more rarely understood. It is called Dat, the invisible gate. Not quite a sephira, not quite a bridge. It is the knowing that comes before form, before structure, a kind of pregnant emptiness. In it, there is no grasping, only being. And from this being, truth flows, like light through stained glass, scattering into infinite colors, yet always returning to one source. You've tasted this knowing before, in moments of stillness. When you walked into a room and sensed something was off, though no one spoke. When a stranger passed you and your heart stirred. When a dream arrived that seemed too precise, too personal, to be anything but a message. These moments weren't coincidences. They were reminders, glimpses of your deeper sight. To know in the alchemical sense is not to gather. It is to remember. The memory is not of information, but of alignment. It is the body remembering how it feels to be in harmony with truth. It is the field of your consciousness syncing with the rhythm of the cosmos. You don't chase it. You stop and let it rise. You don't analyze it. You feel it in your breath, your spine, your skin. The world has taught you to forget. It has praised intellect, rewarded quick answers, conditioned you to believe that truth is found in authority, in data, in proof. But the ancients never sought validation in the external. They turned inward into the sanctum of self, where the divine whispers not through facts but through frequency. They knew that every soul carries a resonance, a signature vibration, and that when you are tuned to it, reality begins to shift in your favor. Imagine now the silent gaze of the Sphinx, not as a statue in the sand, but as a force, a living mirror. She does not speak. She does not move. She watches. Through centuries, through storms, through the rise and fall of civilizations. And yet, her riddle is not one to be solved with cleverness. It is solved with stillness. She is not a test. She is a threshold. You do not conquer her. You meet her gaze. And remember who you are. The first alchemical code, then, is not a lesson in knowledge, but in presence. To know is not to claim. It is to resonate. It is to allow your being to soften into the now, to open like a vessel, so the truth you've been seeking can enter, not as a concept, but as a vibration. You know you've arrived not because you understand, but because you feel peace, deep, wordless peace. There is an intelligence in this universe that cannot be diagrammed. The Taoists call it the Tao. The mystics call it the beloved. The alchemists called it the prima materia. You may simply call it home, and it's not somewhere you travel to, it's a state you remember. When the four codes begin to awaken within you, you don't become something new. You return to what you were before, forgetting. And so the question is not, what do I need to know? The question is, what part of me already know and is waiting for me to listen? Practical exercise. Still point awareness. Let us begin. Find a quiet space. Sit comfortably. Straighten your spine, but let your body soften. Gently close your eyes. Place one hand over the center of your chest. This is not to feel your heartbeat. It is to signal the body. I'm listening now. Now breathe in slowly, deeply, but without force. And as you exhale, imagine your breath falling into the center of your being, into a still point beneath thought, beneath emotion, beneath all noise. There in the center of your chest, not your physical heart, but your energetic one, imagine a small flame. It doesn't flicker. It doesn't grow. It just is. This is your point of knowing. This is where your soul keeps the truth safe, waiting for you to become still enough to touch it. With each breath, settle deeper into this flame. Let thoughts pass like wind through an open window. You are not here to interpret. You are here to be. Let this awareness become a space, spacious enough for knowing to arise without demand, spacious enough to feel the subtle frequency that lives behind the veil of everyday life. After a few minutes, slowly open your eyes. Do not speak, just observe. Notice the air around you, the textures, the shadows, the light. Let your gaze be soft, as if the world itself is whispering something sacred. Because it is. It always has been. You carry this still point with you, wherever you walk. It's not a meditation you do once, it's a gateway you can enter at any moment. In the middle of chaos, in the middle of joy, in the middle of uncertainty. That flame behind your eyes? That's the knowing. That's the first code. When you begin to embody this code, something subtle begins to change. You no longer chase answers with desperation. You start to feel them, emerging in the spaces between words, in the intuition between decisions, in the calm that arrives when you stop resisting what is. You'll begin to see patterns in places you never looked before. You'll begin to trust that slight pull in your gut. You'll begin to notice the way life speaks, not in commands, but in coincidences, symbols, echoes. You will know, not because someone told you, but because a part of you never forgot. This is where the journey begins, not with action, not with willpower, but with recognition. You cannot manifest what you are not aligned with, and alignment begins with remembrance. To know is to see clearly, and to see clearly you must first return to the silence within. You are not here to collect more information. You are here to awaken the frequency of truth, to feel the codes that your ancestors lived, to reignite the torch passed through generations of silence, to remember the flame behind your eyes, and let it light the way forward. Lesson 2. To want. The echo of the soul's agreement. There is a wanting that consumes you, a wanting that aches and clings, a wanting that whispers, more, 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 even as it leaves you emptier each time it speaks. You've felt it. You've chased it. The job, the relationship, the dream house, the recognition, and still something in you remains untouched, as if all the wanting in the world could never reach the part of you that's truly hungry. But there is another kind of wanting, a deeper one, a silent drumbeat that doesn't cry out. It calls. It doesn't scream for attention. It reminds. It's not a voice from the world. It's the echo of an ancient agreement, made long before you had a name. This is the second alchemical code, not desire as craving, but as remembrance. The soul's original longing, the one that led you here. The ancients never spoke of desire in terms of lack. They didn't treat it as a wound to be filled or an appetite to be tamed. For them, desire was not ego. It was orientation. It was direction. It was the invisible compass hidden in the center of your chest, pointing not to what you want to have, but to what you came here to be. The Hermeticists believed that every soul enters this world carrying a vibration, and that vibration has a task, a destiny, a tone in the great cosmic symphony that only you can play. But along the way, you were taught to want the wrong things. You were praised for wanting approval, safety, performance, productivity. You were rewarded for shrinking into roles, for chasing what looked good on paper, for ignoring the quiet tug inside your chest. And so your sacred wanting got buried, beneath shoulds and expectations, beneath images and identities, not destroyed, just hidden. True wanting, the wanting that carries the alchemical code, is not anxious. It does not hustle. It does not care for validation. It pulses, constant, subtle, like an ancestral memory that has outlived 1,000 lifetimes. And when you get quiet enough, you feel it again. You feel it as a longing that makes no logical sense, as a pull towards something that may not offer security or applause, but brings a peace too deep to deny. You don't choose this wanting. It chooses you. It chose you before you were born, before this name, before this body. It is the mission encoded in your being, the sacred signature of your existence. The mystics called it the holy ache, the knowing that you are here for something that matters, not because it's impressive, but because it's true. And yet so many are afraid to feel it, because once you feel it, you can no longer pretend. You can't numb it with busyness. You can't silence it with success. You can't bury it under distractions. It becomes a constant reminder. You are not living your truth. And that truth, if you let it, will dismantle every illusion you've been surviving in. The ego's desire is loud. It wants to prove. It wants to compete. It wants to conquer. It's not really about the thing, it's about being seen getting the thing. It chases external forms, hoping they'll fix an internal fracture. And every time it reaches the goal, the void only grows. Because egoic wanting comes from separation, the belief that something outside you will complete you. But the soul's wanting is different. It's not built on emptiness, it's built on essence. It doesn't grasp. It magnetizes. It doesn't demand. It beckons. And when you begin to live from this place, everything changes. Not because you suddenly have more, but because you're finally home inside what you seek. To walk the path of the alchemist, you must learn to discern between these two kinds of wanting. You must ask yourself, is this desire a reaction or a remembrance? Is it born from fear or from resonance? Is it trying to escape pain or express purpose? The ancient initiates were not free from longing, but their longing came from a soul that remembered why it came here. They didn't chase wealth for status. They called it in as a means to serve. They didn't seek power to control. They allowed it as a tool for transformation. Their desires were not shallow, they were sacred. Every longing was a prayer in motion, every goal an echo of divine intention. And that is the essence of true spiritual wanting. You are not wrong for desiring, but you are being invited to remember the source of your desire, to trace it back, not to marketing, not to scarcity, not to social programming, but to the vibration you carried with you when you entered this world. That vibration is still inside you, waiting, guiding, whispering, not in English or words, but in the rhythm of what makes you come alive. When you ignore that rhythm, life feels heavy. You wake up tired. You pursue things you don't love. You build a life that looks beautiful, but feels hollow. You feel out of place, even when everything should be right. That's not failure, that's feedback. The soul doesn't punish, it redirects. And sometimes that redirection feels like restlessness. Sometimes it feels like grief. Sometimes it feels like being lost. But all of it is a map. All of it is the soul knocking, asking, are you listening yet? What if your desire is not a burden but a beacon? What if that thing you've always wanted but told yourself was too big, too strange, too wild, was not a fantasy but a reminder? What if your longing was never meant to be fixed but followed? The greatest shift in the alchemical path comes when you stop asking, what should I do? And start asking, what is calling me to become? The first question leads to confusion. The second leads to coherence, because when you move in harmony with your true wanting, the universe does not resist, it responds. This is why the ancient ones walked with such clarity. They didn't need to hustle or force. They didn't perform their destiny, they embodied it. And in that embodiment, synchronicities emerged. Paths opened, allies appeared, not because they controlled reality, but because they aligned with the frequency of what they were born to manifest. You are not here to want what the world tells you to want. You are here to want what only you can want. The kind of desire that feels like a flame, not a firework, quiet, but constant, sacred, but persistent. A yearning that does not fade, no matter how many lifetimes you've buried it beneath the noise. So let yourself feel it now. Not just in your mind, but in your chest, your gut, your skin. What do you really want? Not to impress, not to escape, but to express. What is the longing that returns again and again, no matter how often you silence it? That is not fantasy. That is your compass. And when you follow it, gently, honestly, courageously, life begins to unfold in a different way. Not always easily, but always authentically. And authenticity is the vibration that the universe cannot ignore. The second alchemical code is not a command. It's a remembering, a returning, a homecoming to the original pulse of your being. The echo of the agreement your soul made before you entered this world. An agreement to show up as yourself, fully, powerfully, lovingly, truthfully. You don't need permission. You don't need to justify. You only need to listen. Because the wanting that lives in your soul is not ordinary. It is sacred. It is the spark of your unique role in this cosmic dance. And when you follow it, not only do you awaken yourself, you awaken the world. Lesson 3. To dare. Walking through the inner fire. There comes a moment on every sacred path when the soul is called to cross a threshold, a point of no return, a place where knowing and wanting are no longer enough, a place where silence becomes a womb and motion, the birth. This is where the third alchemical code reveals itself, not as an idea but as an initiation, the moment you must dare, not because you feel ready, but because your soul is. To dare is not to roar without fear. It is to walk with fear yet not be ruled by it. The ancient mystics did not define courage as the absence of trembling, but as the refusal to bow to it. They knew the difference between the fear that guards your life and the fear that guards your prison. One protects, the other paralyzes, and spiritual maturity is knowing which is which. You already know what your inner fire is asking of you. You've heard it for months, maybe years, the nudge to leave, to speak, to create, to change. But every time it rises, fear speaks louder. What if I fail? What if I'm wrong? What if I lose everything? But here's the truth. Nothing is lost when you answer the soul. Only illusions, only masks, only the version of you that was never real to begin with. The alchemical fire was never meant to burn you. It was meant to refine you. The lion in the ancient mysteries wasn't a predator. It was a protector, not of safety but of truth. The lion represented the moment the initiate stepped forward, not because he understood everything, but because he trusted something deeper than understanding. He trusted the spark of knowing, the pull of wanting, and the silent agreement that what awaited on the other side of fear was freedom. Daring is sacred motion. It is the soul saying, I am no longer content to remain potential. It is the transformation of essence into experience. You can meditate on your calling for lifetimes. You can feel it, dream it, write about it. But until you move with it, until you take a single step into the unknown, it remains dormant. The ancients never worshipped perfection. They worshipped alignment in action. They knew that a flawed but faithful step carried more power than the most perfect plan never lived. Because movement shifts energy. And once energy moves, so does reality. This is the mystery of daring. It's not about success, it's not about outcome, it's about frequency. Every time you act in alignment with your truth, even if your hands shake, the universe recognizes that signal. It echoes it. It bends toward it. It begins to rearrange. But that first step, it always feels impossible. That's how you know it's sacred. The mind will say, wait, prepare more, think it through again, get clearer first. But clarity does not precede movement, it follows it. You are not supposed to have all the answers. The lion doesn't ask permission from the forest. He just walks, not because he knows what will happen next, but because he knows who he is. The fire you feel is not punishment, it's potential. That restless stirring, that pull in your belly, that spark in your chest, it is life knocking. And the longer you wait, the more it hurts. Because your soul did not come here to be still, it came to become. The Hermeticists taught that daring is the heat that activates the transmutation of matter. Without daring, no metal becomes gold, no intention becomes form, no prayer becomes path. To dare is to apply the sacred pressure that makes something real. But let's be honest, it's not easy. Not in a world that rewards safety, that praises predictability, that punishes deviation. To dare in this world is to risk misunderstanding, rejection, loss. It is to stand in a space where others retreat. It is to say, I will go first, and that is divine. Every act of daring you've ever made has carved you. You might not even remember them all. The time you said no when everything in you wanted to say yes. The time you left. The time you stayed. The time you began again. Those were not small moments. Those were portals. And each time you stepped through, a part of your old self dissolved. A mask fell away. And the lion took one step forward. But what if you fall? What if you're wrong? What if the fire consumes more than you're willing to give? The mystics would say, let it, because fire doesn't destroy what's real. It only burns what was never yours to carry. What remains is truth. What remains is you. The path of daring is not paved in guarantees. It is lit by trust, the kind of trust that doesn't rely on evidence, but on remembrance. You don't. Leap because the net is visible. You leap because something in you knows the net will appear, and maybe the leap is small, a single word, a gesture, a choice no one else sees. But in the subtle realms, every sacred act echoes. What you dare today reshapes the field of tomorrow. Not by force, but by coherence. The fire of daring asks for devotion, not drama. It doesn't need grand gestures. It needs genuine movement. You don't have to uproot your life. Sometimes daring is simply telling the truth. Sometimes it's setting a boundary. Sometimes it's putting your hand on your heart and saying, "This matters," and then living like it does. Remember, hesitation hardens energy. Delay dims your field. But even the smallest step, when taken in alignment, reignites the current of transformation. The alchemist dares, not because he is certain, but because he is called. He walks into the flame with nothing but faith in his bones. And that faith becomes form. That trembling becomes triumph. That motion becomes magic. So what is it for you? What is the leap your soul keeps asking for? You already know. You've known since the moment you heard this truth spoken out loud. Since the moment your heart beat just a little faster. Since the moment you realized this message wasn't just words, it was a mirror. To dare is to say yes, not to the world, but to the voice within you that's been waiting for permission, and this is your permission. The fire is waiting. The lion is ready. The path will not unfold until you step, but once you do, it will rise to meet you, not because you forced it, but because you became worthy of it through motion. This is the third code. This is the moment you cross from potential into power. Lesson 4. To be silent. The sacred altar. Within, there is a place within you that cannot be touched by noise, a place older than your name, deeper than your thoughts, vaster than your fears. It is the altar the ancients built their temples to, mirror, not of stone but of stillness. A sacred center untouched by time or circumstance, and it is only accessed through one forgotten doorway: silence. The fourth alchemical code is not loud. It does not arrive with symbols, signs, or fireworks. It waits, it watches, it protects, and only when the others, to know, to want, to dare, have stirred the soul into movement, does this one rise, not as a technique but as a presence. Because silence is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of power. You were born into a world afraid of silence. It fills every space with noise, notifications, arguments, entertainment. Constant motion, constant information, constant stimulation, and under it all, fear. Because silence threatens what we've built our identities on. In silence there are no distractions, no roles to play, no masks to hold, just the truth and the self who sees it. But the ancients, those who moved, stars and bent elements and channeled mysteries, they lived inside silence. They didn't avoid it. They revered it. They treated it not as emptiness but as the womb of manifestation. Before the word was spoken, there was stillness. Before the form took shape, there was the void. And that void was sacred, not because it was quiet, but because it was pure. Silence to them was a vessel. It was the Athanor, the alchemical furnace where energies gather, refine, and become gold. Every great ritual began with silence, every invocation with breath, every sacred work with stillness. Because they understood, noise scatters, silence contains. When you hold silence with intention, you're not suppressing expression. You're preparing the field. You're inviting the sacred to enter. You are creating a container strong enough to hold the unseen until it's ready to emerge. Without silence, your energy leaks, your magic dissipates, your manifestation collapses under the weight of words never meant to be spoken too soon. Have you ever felt it? that inner knowing to not speak about something just yet, the instinct to protect a vision, a dream, an insight, from curious eyes and casual words. That is not secrecy, that is sacred containment, because not everything fragile is meant to be shared. Some things must root before they rise. Some truths must mature in the dark before they can face the sun. In the language of the mystics, silence was not passive, it was potent. The Kabbalists called it the hidden letter, the one that came before creation. The Egyptians wrapped their most powerful teachings in symbols, not to confuse the masses, but to shield the truth from those who would misuse it. Even the Sphinx with her riddle did not speak her secrets. She guarded them. Because some things must be felt, not explained, and in your own life you've known this too. The more you speak of what is sacred before it's ready, the more it becomes distorted, diluted, doubted, not always out of malice, but out of misalignment, because the world as it is cannot hold what hasn't been anchored yet. It reacts, it questions, it reflects fear. The ancient alchemists knew this well. That's why they encoded their practices in glyphs, their formulas in metaphor, their teachings in myth. Not to hoard knowledge, but to honor its maturation. They understood that what is not grounded in silence will shatter under scrutiny. That silence is the root system of all lasting transformation. To be silent is not to hide. It is to honor the gestation of your becoming. It is to understand that the most powerful seeds grow underground first, that the sprout must strengthen in darkness before facing the light, that your most potent magic will first appear as stillness before it, manifests as form. So when the world demands you speak, perform, explain, pause, feel, breathe, ask, is this truth ripe, or is it still forming? Because when you protect what's sacred in silence, you're not withholding, you're witnessing. You're becoming the guardian of your own temple, the altar keeper of your own soul. There's a silence that is heavy and numb. That's not the silence we speak of. That is repression, disconnection. But the silence of this fourth code is alive. It listens, it receives, it holds. It doesn't seek to escape, it seeks to deepen. It is the kind of silence that turns your breath into prayer, your awareness into offering, your presence into power. In a world addicted to reaction, silence is rebellion. It is sovereignty, to not respond when provoked, to not explain when misunderstood, to not argue when attacked. That is power, that is clarity. Because when you no longer need to prove, you have already arrived. This is why the silence of the mystics was magnetic. Their presence was louder than their words. Their stillness radiated more than 1,000 speeches. They didn't need to convince. They were the proof. Because when you are deeply rooted in your inner silence, you become a mirror, and the world cannot help but see itself reflected in you. Silence is the fourth flame in the alchemist's heart. It tempers knowing, refines wanting, steadies daring. It doesn't stop the journey, it prepares the next step. In the silence, you are not inactive. You are becoming available to wisdom, to guidance, to alignment, and that alignment, once felt, needs no defense. It speaks in frequency. So ask yourself now, where in your life is silence being asked for? What part of you is yearning to be held, not explained? What vision is waiting to root before it's revealed? What truth is still becoming whole inside? You trust it, hold it, guard it, because in doing so you do not delay your becoming, you accelerate it. Silence is the final chamber of initiation, not because it is the end, but because it leads back to the beginning. It reminds you, you are not here to shout. You are here to resonate. You are not here to convince, you are here to embody. And when you walk as one who knows the power of silence, the universe listens. Lesson 5. The Sphinx, the guardian of the codes. She does not speak. She watches, eternal, unblinking. The sun rises and falls, empires rise and vanish into dust. And still, she waits. The Sphinx. But she does not wait for you to solve her. She waits for you to see yourself. In the ancient mystery schools, The Sphinx was not just a monument, she was a threshold, a living archetype, a guardian of the four alchemical codes, not a creature to be conquered, but a mirror to be understood. Her silence was not absence, it was initiation, because only those who had awakened all parts of themselves, mind, body, courage, and spirit, could pass through her gaze. Look at her again. She is not one thing, she is many. The head of a man, the body of a bull, the paws of a lion, and the wings of an eagle. She is a synthesis, a union, of elements that do not coexist in the natural world. She belongs to no species, no system. She is an impossible being, and in that impossibility she becomes a map. Each part of her body whispers a message, not about what you must learn, but about what you must remember within. The human head, intelligence. Not the intelligence of memorized knowledge or cleverness, but the capacity to perceive truth beyond illusion. This is not intellect, it is awakened awareness, the kind that sees patterns where others see chaos. That listens between the lines, that notices the vibration behind the voice. It is the clarity of an unclouded gaze, the one that says, "I see," before anything is spoken. This is the part of you that questions, that searches for meaning, that discerns the real from the false. In the alchemical process, it is the spark that begins the transmutation, because without awareness you cannot align, and without alignment, nothing manifests in harmony. The body of the bull, endurance, strength not of force, but of sustainability. The bull moves slowly, but it does not stop. It carries the weight of transformation through storms, through fear, through fatigue. This is the part of you that keeps going even when the fire burns low, even when the path disappears, even when your knees shake. In your life, this is discipline without rigidity, commitment without obsession. It is the steady beat of practice, of presence, of showing up again and again, not because you're certain, but because you're devoted. The bull doesn't rush. It remembers that the temple is not built in a day, but brick by sacred brick. The paws of the lion, courage, not the loud, dramatic kind that demands attention, but the quiet, sovereign courage that comes from knowing your path is yours alone. The lion walks through the forest, not because it owns the forest, but because it belongs there. This is not ego, this is essence, the knowing that your presence is valid, even when no one applauds, even when no one understands. The lion in you is the part that says yes to your soul, when fear screams no. The part that dares to stay with discomfort, that dares to rise after being broken, that dares to act before the plan is perfect. This is the flame that turns intention into action and fear into fuel. And then the wings of the eagle, spirit, vision, perspective. This is the part of you that remembers you are not just this body, not just this moment, not just this story. The eagle rises above the clouds not to escape, but to see. It glides between worlds. It pierces illusions. It connects to the divine not through distance, but through clarity. When this part of you is active, you stop reacting and start responding. You stop clinging and start trusting. You stop needing control because you realize you're already in the hands of something wiser. The eagle reminds you that manifestation isn't just about effort, it's about elevation. And when you rise above, the path becomes visible. The chaos becomes a code. These are the four forces: mind, strength, courage, spirit, not separate. Not linear, but simultaneous. The Sphinx does not ask for one, she demands all. Because power without wisdom is destruction. Courage without grounding is recklessness. Knowing without spirit becomes arrogance. And spirit without action becomes fantasy. She is the guardian of balance, not because she punishes imbalance, but because she reflects it. She shows you in her silence what parts of you are asleep, what parts of you are overactive, what parts of you have been exiled, ignored, neglected. She doesn't block the way, you do. She merely waits for the day your inner forces rise in harmony. This is why the initiates of ancient Egypt placed the Sphinx at the entrance to sacred space. She was not decoration. She was the test. Not a riddle to answer, but a being to become. Because only the soul in balance could enter the temple of transformation. Only the self that had awakened all four powers could hold the codes without being shattered by them. Look at your life now. Which part of the Sphinx is whispering to you? You need more stillness to see clearly, more devotion to stay the course, more bravery to finally leap, more trust to release control? She will show you, not through words but through life, through the reflections that meet you, through the people who trigger you, through the dreams that return again and again, through the longings that never leave. Everything is her mirror. Every moment is a message. To live as the Sphinx is to become a creature of alignment, to become impossible in the eyes of the world, yet utterly true in the eyes of your soul. You are not meant to be one thing. You are not here to fit a mold. You are here to synthesize, to unify your forces, to live as a paradox made whole. When you do, something changes, not outside you but within. You begin to move differently, speak differently. Even your silence carries weight, because now every word is backed by thought, every action by heart, every breath by spirit. You become someone who is not seeking power, but radiating coherence, and that coherence is power. This is what the Sphinx guards, not a treasure but a threshold, a space where the fragmented self becomes sovereign, a space where the seeker becomes the source. And when you reach this place, not through striving, but through surrender, she does not move aside. She vanishes. Because the guardian was never separate from you. She was the part of you that waited to be made whole. And now, perhaps you're ready. Lesson 6. Emotions as sacred material. You were never meant to escape your emotions. You were meant to walk through them like ancient corridors, lit with flame, echoing with memory. The ancients knew this. They did not bypass emotion. They transmuted it. They didn't suppress their feelings to become spiritual. They became spiritual through their feelings. To the alchemist, emotion was not an inconvenience. It was material. Raw, primal, potent. The kind of material that doesn't ask to be fixed but faced. It wasn't about calming the storm. It was about learning to sail in it. Because only in the deepest waters does the truest gold reveal itself. Fear, anger, grief, shame. These were not enemies to overcome, but sacred initiations. They were doors, heavy ones, yes, but always leading inward. And what you found beyond them wasn't more pain. It was the part of yourself you had long abandoned. Waiting, watching, asking only to be seen. Fear, when ignored, becomes paralysis. But when welcomed with presence, it becomes focus. It sharpens you, it prepares you. It doesn't always tell you to stop. It tells you where you need to become more conscious. The fear you feel isn't a weakness. It's your spirit saying, "This moment is real, be awake." To walk through fear is to learn trust. Not blind trust in outcomes, but embodied trust in yourself. Anger, when suppressed, becomes poison. It corrodes the nervous system. It hardens the heart. But anger, when honored, becomes clarity. It reveals where your boundaries have been crossed. It shows you what matters. Not to destroy, but to protect. Not to attack, but to defend what is. Sacred. Anger isn't chaos. It's the body remembering where it was silenced. And if you dare to listen, it will speak truth like fire through your spine. Grief, though, is its own kind of storm. Gentle at times, crushing at others. It arrives when something has been lost. Sometimes a person, sometimes a belief, sometimes a version of yourself that can never return. Grief strips you of everything non-essential. It empties the vessel, but not to leave you barren, only to make room for something holy. In ancient rites, grief was not hidden. It was honored. Because to grieve is to say this mattered, and that in itself is sacred. The alchemists called this stage the nigredo, the blackening, the descent, the breakdown before the breakthrough. It is not pretty. It is not pleasant, but it is essential, because before gold can shine, the false gold must burn away. The illusions, the identities, the masks, they don't survive the fire, but your essence does. It always does. You've been through this before, haven't you? Quiet nights with loud thoughts, sudden tears you couldn't explain, the ache behind your ribs that no medicine could reach. These weren't breakdowns, these were initiations. Your soul wasn't falling apart. It was refining itself, sharpening you, calling you back to the part of yourself that remembers emotion is not the enemy, it's the alchemical fire. Modern spirituality often teaches us to rise above our emotions, to quiet them, to think our way out of them. But the ancients knew better. They knew that real transformation doesn't come from detachment, it comes from descent. You don't escape emotion to evolve, you go deeper into it. You mine it. You melt it. You carry it to the furnace, not to destroy it, but to transmute it. Because when emotion is felt fully without judgment, it transforms on its own. Rage becomes resolve. Grief becomes wisdom. Fear becomes direction. The key is presence, not control, not fixing, just presence. To sit with your emotion like an ancient being, to breathe with it, to ask it what it wants you to see. You don't need to dramatize it. You don't need to spiritualize it. You just need to listen. There is intelligence in your sadness. There is guidance in your frustration. There is memory in your fear. Each emotion carries a message, and if you don't receive it, it will repeat itself louder and louder until you do. Not to punish you, but because it is the only way your soul knows how to speak when words have failed. In the Hermetic principle, as within, so without, emotion becomes vibration. What you carry in, your emotional body becomes the blueprint for what shows up around you. Not because the universe is punishing you, but because it is mirroring your energy back to you for healing. If you carry hidden rage, life will reflect it until you free it. If you bury grief, your creations will echo its emptiness. But when you honor your emotions, when you let them rise and fall like sacred tides, your energy field begins to soften. Your vibration aligns, and from that alignment your manifestations become coherent, not reactive, not chaotic, but clear. You create not from a place of compensation, but from a place of integration. And this is what the true alchemists mastered. They didn't fear their shadows. They entered them. They sat with their pain like students. They opened their wounds and listened, because they knew that every emotion held a piece of their soul. And to reject the emotion was to reject the self. You are being asked to do the same now, not to be fearless, but to be willing. To enter the emotion, not with resistance, but with reverence. To see it not as a flaw, but as a flame that purifies, a flame that prepares you to carry more light. You don't need to explain your emotions to anyone. You don't need to justify them. You only need to feel them honestly, fully, safely, in the sanctuary of your own presence. That's where the transmutation happens, not in theory, but in the quiet, trembling moments when you finally say, "Yes, I feel this, and I will not run from it anymore, because you are not here to be clean, you are here to be clear. Clear in your being, clear in your becoming." And that clarity begins when you stop silencing your storms and begin honoring them as sacred teachers. Let your emotions guide you home. Let them show you the parts of you still waiting to be seen. And let the fire of your feelings become the forge of your transformation. This is not a weakness, this is not indulgence, this is alchemy. Lesson 7. The Temple of the Ordinary. It's easy to believe that the sacred lives only in ceremony, in ancient chants, in moonlit rituals, in silent monasteries and candle-lit halls. And yet, the deepest alchemists, the true initiates, always knew a secret the world often forgets. Real magic is hidden in the ordinary, not in escape, but in engagement. The ancients built temples, yes, but those temples were never just structures of stone. They were mirrors, reflections of an inner architecture, symbols pointing back to a deeper truth, that the true temple is you, and that The world around you, your home, your breath, your simplest gestures, is a living altar. You don't need incense to be sacred. You don't need robes to be holy. You only need to be present. Because presence is what turns the ordinary into the miraculous. When you stir your tea with reverence, you stir the field. When you fold your clothes with attention, you restore order to your energy. When you light a candle with intention, not performance, you ignite the unseen. These aren't chores. These are rites. Small acts, yes, but acts that carry coherence. And in the mystical laws of reality, coherence is what creates. This is the wisdom the mystics passed in whispers. That the divine is not separate from the mundane. That every moment, however trivial, can be a portal. Not because it looks spiritual, but because it feels aligned. When your energy matches your intention, even sweeping the floor becomes an invocation. The ancients didn't wait for full moons to be magical. They lived in rhythm. They knew that the divine doesn't demand spectacle. It responds to frequency. Not what you show, but what you radiate. And frequency is built not in peaks but in patterns. In how you greet your day. In how you prepare your food. In how you treat the space you live in. You don't need to leave your life to find the sacred. You need to see your life differently. The dishes in your sink are a reflection of your vibration. The dust in your corners is not just physical. It's energetic residue, the way you dress, the way you breathe, the way you speak. It's all a signal. And the field, the living matrix that surrounds you, is always listening. Not to your words, but to your consistency. This is the quiet revolution of the alchemist. Not to escape the world, but to sanctify it. To live not as someone doing magic, but as someone being it. Every gesture, every word, every breath becomes a thread in the tapestry of manifestation. And suddenly you realize you're never not practicing magic. You're always creating, always transmitting, always casting vibrations into the invisible. The question is not, am I manifesting? The question is, what frequency am I weaving into the fabric of now? When you clean your space, do you do it with resentment or with reverence? When you eat, do you taste with gratitude or numbness? When you speak, do you speak to connect or to control? These are not spiritual details. These are spiritual codes, because energy doesn't lie. And coherence, the alignment of thought, feeling, and action, is what opens the gates of manifestation. You want transformation. Start with your posture, your presence, the way you pour water, the way you listen when no one is watching. That's where the true rites occur, in the unseen, in the uncelebrated. In the temple of the ordinary, there is no enlightenment without embodiment. There is no ascension without attention. You cannot climb to the stars while neglecting the soil. And the ancients knew this. That's why the priest didn't just chant. He also swept the steps. That's why the oracle didn't just speak visions. She also tended the fire. Because tending is magic. Maintenance is sacred. Repetition, when done with awareness, becomes a ritual of integration. And in this way, manifestation stops being an act of force and becomes a natural result. You don't beg the universe for miracles. You become worthy of them through your consistency. Your vibration becomes so stable, so true, so magnetic, that reality can't help but match you. The field doesn't respond to drama. It responds to clarity, to structure, to rhythm. That's why monks rise at dawn, why mystics walk in circles, why yogis bow before and after every session. Not for superstition, but to anchor intention into the body, into time, into space. So look again at your life. Your home is your first temple, your voice, your daily prayer, your food, the offering, your body, the altar, and your breath, the eternal incense that rises from moment to moment, connecting the invisible with the form. Don't chase signs from the universe. Become a sign for the universe. Let your life be a living invitation, a declaration of readiness. When your energy is clean, your actions clear, and your environment aligned, the path reveals itself, not because you chased it, but because you created a space where it could arrive. The ancient ones weren't always in caves or pyramids. They were also in kitchens and fields and marketplaces. The difference wasn't what they did, it was how they did it, with attention, with rhythm, with sacred repetition. And in doing so, they turned time into ceremony, labor into liturgy, life into alchemy. So what if you began to see your life that way? What if every task became a teaching, every silence a sanctuary, every step a spell? You are not separate from the sacred. You never were. The illusion was that it lived elsewhere, in symbols, in temples, in places far from where you are. But now you remember. You remember what the alchemists knew all along, that the ordinary is not the opposite of the sacred. It is the stage where the sacred reveals itself. The deeper you root in the simplicity of your daily life, the more your vibration stabilizes. And in that stability, miracles don't need to be summoned. They arrive like breath, like sunrise, like certainty. So today, begin again, but not with more effort. Begin with more intention. Let the bed you make be a blessing. Let the words you speak be a blessing. Let the steps you walk be a blessing, not because someone is watching, but because you are. That's where the magic begins, in your hands, in your breath, in the temple of the ordinary. Lesson 8, Becoming the Frequency. The return of the one who remembers. There comes a moment in every true journey when the seeker stops seeking, not because the path has ended, but because something ancient has awakened within. You no longer chase wisdom. You become its vessel. You no longer perform the sacred. You are the sacred. And this is the moment of return, not to where you began, but to who you've always been. This is the 8th and final lesson. Becoming the frequency. You've walked through the codes. To know, to want, to dare, to be silent. You've faced the Sphinx, sat in the fire of your emotions, honored the ordinary, and now something has changed. You're not asking anymore. You're remembering. The alchemists never chased transformation. They dissolved into it. They became what they once tried to summon. They reached a state beyond effort, beyond striving, a state where reality began to bend toward them, not through command, but through coherence. And that coherence is not a trick. It is a frequency. When your mind is clear, your heart aligned, your actions coherent, something happens. You stop generating scattered signals. You stop contradicting yourself vibrationally. You stop leaking energy through doubt, fear, and second-guessing. And the field around you feels it. It responds, not out of loyalty, but out of law. Because the universe doesn't respond to your words, it responds to your state. This is why the final transformation isn't about doing more. It's about being differently. You don't light the torch anymore, you are the flame. You don't recite mantras for power. You vibrate power through your silence. You don't visualize your future. You radiate the vibration that draws it to you naturally. Because you've become the very thing you used to try and attract. The Hermetic masters called this state the philosopher's stone, not a literal object, but a level of consciousness, a vibrational purity that could turn lead into gold, chaos into order, thought into manifestation. It wasn't magic in the way modern minds imagine. It was alignment, the kind of alignment that doesn't ask, it calls, and when you begin to live from that place, life changes, not always dramatically, but undeniably. You walk into a room and it feels different. You speak and people lean in. You move through. Your day and synchronicity begins to hum around you like a forgotten melody finding its rhythm again. Not because you've done anything new, but because you've become someone true. The great paradox of all esoteric paths is this. The deeper you go, the simpler it gets. You thought you needed more knowledge. You thought you needed more rituals. You thought you needed more tools. But what you really needed was less noise, less interference, less pretending to be someone else, and more permission to become who you already are beneath all the forgetting. That is what it means to become the frequency. It's not about becoming more. It's about becoming clear. So clear that truth flows through you without distortion. So still that the divine has nothing to push against. So empty of performance that presence takes over. And here's the beauty. When you arrive here, the codes are no longer concepts. They are you. You don't know in the mental sense. You carry knowing in your gaze. You don't want from lack. You vibrate desire as devotion. You don't dare as a gesture. You live as a lion, soft in stillness, fearless in motion. You don't choose silence. You move in it even as you speak. You don't recite these codes anymore. You don't try to remember them. They remember you. You've become a vessel of ancient remembrance, a walking temple, a breathing mirror. A field of vibration so attuned, so coherent, that even the unseen responds with reverence. And it's here, in this clarity, that the great return begins. Not your return to the divine, but the divine's return through you. Because the ancient ones, the ones who walked the stars, who encoded the glyphs, who whispered the truths into temples and stones, they are not far. They are waiting. Waiting for coherence. Waiting for a vibration that can hold them. Waiting for you. And when your field becomes clear enough, they remember your name. This is not fantasy. This is resonance. You see, memory is not only stored in the mind, it's stored in vibration. And when your frequency matches the code they left behind, the forgotten knowledge awakens. Not as text, as truth in motion. You begin to move like them, think like them, speak in the rhythm of stars and silence, not because you studied, because you embodied. This is the secret they protected with symbols and silence. Power does not lie in having more, it lies in needing less. Less resistance, less doubt, less separation between who you are and who you think you must be. Because when you stop performing for the world and begin vibrating from the soul, the world shifts to meet you. This is the gate, the one you don't walk through, but become. And once you become the gate, everything the ancients carried flows through you. You no longer seek miracles. You radiate them. You no longer try to teach. You transmit. Your very presence becomes a teaching. Your silence becomes a sanctuary. Your gaze becomes the invitation to remember, and those around you feel it, even if they don't understand. Because frequency bypasses language. It speaks directly to the soul, and that is what you are now, a living code, a breathing bridge, the sacred flame that no longer flickers with fear, but burns with truth. You've walked the circle. You've cracked the stone. You've faced the fire. You've returned to silence, and now you become the one who no longer seeks the light, but who is the light. Not by force, by frequency. You are the one the ancient ones whispered about. You are the one the temple gates open for. You are the one who remembers. And it is from you that the new codes will be born. Conclusion. The flame is no longer far. It no longer lives only in ancient scrolls, whispered myths, or forgotten pyramids. It burns now, quietly, clearly, inside you. Not as a spark you must protect, but as a torch you are meant to carry. You've walked the circle. You've known with more than thought. You've wanted from the soul, not the ego. You've dared through trembling. And you've sat in silence, not as absence, but as presence. Now something in you has shifted, not because you added more, but because you remembered who you were beneath the forgetting. The alchemical codes were never truly lost. They were dormant, waiting for the one who would not just study them, but become them. And now they live in your breath, in your field, in the quiet coherence of your being. This is not the end of the journey. This is the place where the real path begins. The place where knowledge stops being words and starts becoming your walk, your tone, your gaze, your vibration. You do not need to recite these teachings. You radiate them. You do not need to chase your becoming. You are already pulsing with it. The ancient ones never wanted disciples. They were calling for mirrors, reflections of the same light that once moved through them. And when you live as one who knows, who wants, who dares, and who holds silence like a chalice, that ancient current flows through you, not as performance, but as presence. So now the torch is yours, not to wave in pride, but to walk with in humility. Not to light the world from ego, but to warm it with truth. This isn't a closing, it's a circle folding in on itself. A breath exhaled so another may begin. You are the bridge now, the one who carries the memory in their marrow. And every choice you make, every silence you keep, every gesture you offer, it's all vibration, it's all frequency, it's all the work. So no, the journey doesn't end here, it awakens here. And the only question that remains is not what you'll do, but who you're now willing to be. The torch is yours. Walk as the flame.